Welcome back to the channel. You're watching Sawtooth Tactical, and this video is probably long overdue. Today we are talking muzzle devices because there's something that it's probably like the easiest thing to change out or upgrade on your gun, and it's one of the most effective when it comes to, changing how your gun feels, how it responds to recoil, how it performs. And so it's maybe one of the first things that a lot of people do change when they get an AR-15 with a basic A2 birdcage flash hider. When I first got into this and I first realized that you can change out a muzzle device and really change the way that your gun feels and shoots, it was like a mind-blowing moment to me. Now, there are four main kinds of muzzle devices. You have flash hiders like this 3-prong here. You have brakes, you have comps, and then you have suppressors. And we're going to talk about all four of them because they all do different things. Some of them kind of overlap, and see what may work best for you. So if you're interested in that, make sure you're subscribed and let's begin. So the first type of muzzle device that we're going to talk about are flash hiders, like this 3-prong that I've got on my 14.5-inch build. And the reason why we're talking about flash hiders first is because most AR-15s, when you buy them from the factory, will come with one of these. This is the A2 birdcage flash hider. And it's actually a really good muzzle device. A lot of people switch them out right away because it's so easy to switch out. But what I've found is that generally you probably don't need to. Although there are lots of good options, and honestly, I don't have a single A2 flash hider on any of my guns right now. So don't want to be a hypocrite there, not taking my own advice. But the A2 birdcage is actually a flash hider and a comp to an extent. And the reason for that is this. So it has all of these slits in it. That helps spread the gases out to hide the flash. But it's also covered on the bottom, and those slits are only around the top, which actually makes those gases push your muzzle down, doing some compensating. But the main point of a flash hider is exactly that. It's signature reduction, specifically flash signature reduction. Now, why would you want that? Well, unless you're just out shooting at the range on a sunny day, I mean, if that's what you're doing, it probably doesn't matter much. And mostly, that's what I'm doing. And so mostly, that probably doesn't matter much for me. But if you end up having to shoot at night, that muzzle blast flash can blind you. It can give away your position if you're actually shooting in a real tactical scenario, which, yes, these things are fun, and we go out and shoot them and train with them, but they are for a real reason. If we ever had to be in that situation, not giving away your position by having a giant fireball coming out of your muzzle is a good thing. And so most people that, are preparing for those kinds of, SHTF, tactical kind of situations, really lean more towards flash hiders, I've found. And on my newest build, I did use a flash hider, even though I've been running brakes and comps mostly before that. We're going to get into brakes and comps in a minute, and what the benefits of those are that you don't really get with a flash hider. But what I've also found is that even though the flash hider doesn't do a lot for muzzle rise or felt recoil, if your gun is tuned properly, you're still going to have a very soft shooting gun. So even though this has a 3-prong flash hider on it, which the 3-prong and 4-prong flash hiders are very effective at, reducing that flash signature. But this gun still is very soft shooting, even with just a flash hider on it. So you don't necessarily need a brake to make your gun soft shooting, although that is a very easy way to do it. Quick word from this video's sponsor. I've been using Aura now for a couple of months. I know you guys have seen it in my videos if you've been watching, and it's a product and a service that I really actually believe in at this point. It has totally stopped me from getting spam calls. Now, data brokers are a real thing these days. Scammers, spammers, all this stuff. I've been trying to sell a pickup truck lately, and at first all I was getting was scammers. Well, Aura took care of that, and I'm not hearing from the scammers anymore. Unfortunately, I still haven't sold the truck, but I've got a lot of examples like that. In fact, the place where I work just recently got scammed, and we lost out on a whole day's worth of revenue. Well, Aura can stop things like that from happening. They search the entire internet for anywhere where your information is being sold to people, and they submit opt-out requests on your behalf, which takes care of your information being out there. It clears you up so that you stop getting spam calls, you stop getting scammers. There are people out there these days whose whole career is just scamming people out of their money by finding their information on the internet. And as sickening and as sad as that is, it's a reality. And for only $12 a month, you can stop them from being able to take advantage of you. If you use my link, which is the first link in the description, aura.com/sawtooth-tactical, you get to try it out free for 2 weeks. And then you can decide if it's something that you still want to stick with. But Aura is pretty confident that you'll stick with it, and that's why they give you that 2-week free trial. $12 a month after that is a really good deal for all of the different things that you get with Aura. I've been sticking with it for a few months. I'm really happy with it. I respect my privacy, and I respect yours. Another thing about flash hiders, or just muzzle devices in general, that I'm going to go into in the flash hider segment here, because it's a good example of it, is a lot of muzzle devices are actually QD systems for suppressors. So this is the ASR Bravo mount from Silencer Co. The suppressor that is going to be hooked onto this mount is still awaiting ATF approval, but I can still use it to show you guys what I mean. So this flash hider is a Silencer Co. ASR flash hider. And so it screws on there, and then it locks on, and then your suppressor is locked onto that flash hider. Now, they make brakes, comps. You can get all kinds of muzzle devices that are also suppressor hosts. So just keep that in mind. Maybe you don't have a suppressor now. Maybe you don't think that you're going to ever have a suppressor. I used to think that way myself. And now I'm in the process of getting new muzzle devices for all of my 5.56 guns to have them ASR compatible. So if you are looking at muzzle devices, I know it's a little bit more expensive, but I would look into suppressor host muzzle devices. And there are a lot of good ones out there. The Silencer Co. ASR is what I've gone with here. Surefire has their own system. There's Dead Air, Chemo, Q, Plan B. There's the Rearden. Lots of good ones. Look into that if you ever think that you might run a suppressor. And we're going to talk about suppressors last because they are my very favorite muzzle devices and kind of do the best of all worlds. But there are other considerations when it comes to those as well. Next, I want to talk about muzzle brakes. So a muzzle brake generally looks like this. It's got some big ports out either side. And what it does is it pushes that muzzle blast perpendicular to the bore, which actually reduces actual real recoil. Where a comp forces the gun down, reducing perceived recoil and muzzle rise, a brake actually reduces recoil, and it's probably the cheapest and easiest way that you can make your gun recoil less. And the way that it does that is generally brakes have a small bore hole in the end, and these ports act like baffles. And so when the hot expanding gases behind them hit them, they come out the sides instead of out the end. You can even have brakes where these are angled backwards, and it'll actually kind of pull the gun forward in a way, acts like a jet of sorts, and they are very, very effective. So I've got a form of a brake on this 11.5 inch, on this 16 inch, and on my AR9 here, and they are extremely effective. So when I first got this 11.5 inch, It was my first short-barreled AR, and I got it before I was even really a very good shooter at all. Not like I am now either, but I was even less of a good shooter back then. And I just wasn't good at controlling recoil yet. And I felt like my sights moved around a lot. And I put this Strike Industries King comp on it after getting the Strike Industries J comp for my 16-inch here. Because they really are effective. Both of these guns now are extremely flat shooting. And these are actually kind of brake comp hybrid devices. And the reason I say that, mainly these are brakes, but you see those little ports in the top, those actually do push gases up, which helps to force your muzzle back down. This one right here, especially this VG6 Gamma, this is a 9mm brake on my 9mm AR, and it has all of these slits up top that are before the end of it, and so all of those gases are forced up as well as out the side, which helps keep your muzzle flat. And it reduces muzzle rise, and it really does work. A lot of people talk about direct blowback AR9s, which is what this is, as having as much recoil as a 5.56 AR. Well, that has not been my experience with this gun at all, and I attribute a lot of that to this brake. This is a very soft shooting gun, very easy to control. And so is this one, and so is this one, and a lot of that is because of the muzzle brakes on them. Now, I said earlier that this gun shoots softer, even though it's only got a flash hider. Well, that's because it has a mid-length gas system, and the buffer is tuned properly. It's just a more expensive, nicer build, and it does shoot softer. But these ones, which are carbine length gas systems and are just off the shelf, kind of cheaper rifles. This one's a PSA. This one's a Smith & Wesson M&P Sport 2. They're not built to be the softest shooting rifles in the world. And so putting these brakes on them made a huge difference. But the other thing that it did is it really makes it not fun to be around the shooter. And this is something that I didn't even understand until I started letting other people shoot my guns, and then I was off to the side of it. A muzzle brake, the blast coming out of the sides of it it's gnarly. The concussive energy coming out of these, if you're standing off to the side, it feels like you're getting punched in the jaw every time that the shooter pulls the trigger. And so it kind of does the exact opposite of a flash hider when it comes to signature reduction. These actually give you more flash signature. All of that expanding, exploding gases come out of the sides, and especially at night, you're really going to see them. But even in the day, if you're not the shooter and you're off to either side, it is extreme, that concussion. Now, there are things that you can do about that. And each brand kind of has their own version of this. But these are blast forwarding devices, or blast shields. Strike Industries, which is the brand that I chose for these 2 years ago, has this. This is the Strike Industries oppressor. And the way that the oppressor works, it actually attaches kind of like a suppressor would. But it's got a QD system, a locking collar, and it locks down onto these muzzle devices. This also works on the King comp that I have on my 11.5 inch. And in fact, that's the one I use it on generally, because short-barreled 5.56, a lot of unburnt gases with a big brake. The concussive forces are extremely violent. I don't use it as much on this gun, but since I had it out, it was a good way to show you guys. But that goes on there, and then that redirects all of those gases forward instead of off to the sides. And a good blast forwarding device will still maintain the effectiveness of the brake underneath, but not kill everybody off to the sides of you with a concussive blast. So if you are going to run a brake and you plan on shooting around other people regularly, something like this might be a great idea. It is going to add a lot of weight to the end of your gun though. I used to run this on my 5.56 11.5 inch a lot. I do it less now unless I've got other people with me, just because it does add a lot of weight to the muzzle end. It's a big piece of steel. Now, when we talk about comps and hybrid muzzle devices, comps generally, and I'm going to use a brake again to make this use it as an example because I don't really have any pure comps. They're all kind of hybrids, but comps force the gases in a specific direction, usually up, to keep muzzle rise down. So comps generally, pure comps, don't actually reduce actual recoil, but they reduce perceived recoil by reducing muzzle rise, keeping your sights on target. But the other thing about comps is that a lot of them are hybrid devices. Like this is a muzzle brake and a comp. So it has that braking action, which reduces actual recoil, and it forces gases up, reducing muzzle rise, compensating for muzzle rise, hence why it's called a comp. This one is another good example of that, where it's a muzzle brake with those big ports, but then it's got some, ports on top, shooting gases upward, pushing your muzzle back down, compensating. This one also has this crown on the end, is actually to help hide flash as well, although I'm not sure how effective that really is when you've got a big muzzle brake, 2 ports right behind that. But this is a comp and a muzzle brake. And even the A2 Birdcage flash hider, like I said in the beginning of the video, it's a flash hider for the most part, but it also is a comp because it's closed on the bottom and all of these slits are only on the top and the sides, forcing the gases in a specific direction, helping to push your muzzle down a little bit. Now, is this the most effective comp in the world? No, but it does have some compensating action with those flash hiding characteristics. There's so many different kinds of muzzle device designs out there. I mean, this is one for an AK, which I suppose you would call this a brake because there's nothing really that pushes gases in a specific direction to reduce muzzle climb, but it does have these very interesting shaped ports that kind of force the gases back, pulling the gun forward, reducing recoil. And while we're talking AK, this is an AK slant brake, which they call it a brake, but technically it's more of a comp. But the colloquial term is slant brake, and if you look at it, it slants to a specific side. And that was designed specifically when this gun is under full auto. It tends to rise up and to the right. And so that slant brake is meant to push it down and to the left, compensating for the muzzle rise that you would get in full auto. My AK is semi-auto. How effective this really is, I'm not sure. But when I put this on the end of it, it does really reduce that recoil in a very noticeable way. Now, the last type of muzzle device that I want to talk about is my favorite type of muzzle device, and that is suppressors. And the reason why suppressors are my favorite is because they basically do all of what everything else does in one package. Now, most people think of suppressors as reducing noise signature, sound, and that is what they do. That's a big part of what they do. But they also reduce flash signature. I mean, if all of your hot expanding gases are trapped in here and slowed down and cooled before they come out the end, well, you're not going to have nearly as much flash. You're obviously going to not have as much sound, which none of these others reduce sound. And in fact, muzzle brakes kind of increase sound. So you get flash signature reduction with this, you get sound reduction, but you also get recoil reduction and muzzle rise reduction. Because those, again, hot expanding gases get to expand inside of this chamber here instead of out in, the air there, they are still expanding out before they exit your bore there. And they really do make your gun softer shooting generally. Now, there are a lot of different suppressors out there, and some do different things better than others. But pretty much all of them do have these characteristics of sound and flash signature reduction, as well as recoil reduction, making your gun softer shooting. They also do add weight to the muzzle, which weight reduces muzzle rise. So they pretty much do what you want all of your different muzzle devices to do, all in one muzzle device. Now, this does come with trade-offs. For one, they're bigger. They do add weight to the end of your gun, and they add length to your gun. And, I like shorter guns. I like maneuverable guns. In fact, that's why I went with such a short suppressor on this 300 Blackout gun. And the bigger the suppressor you have, generally the more effective it's going to be, especially at sound signature reduction. And the smaller the suppressor, it's probably not going to be as effective. But again, all trade-offs. Smaller, it's going to be lighter, more maneuverable. The other trade-offs are, unfortunately, legal trade-offs. All of these other muzzle devices, you can go out and buy at any gun store. You can order them online, have them shipped straight to your door, and they're relatively affordable, this one, the Silencer Co. ASR, is a little expensive, especially when you start getting into the actual, QD attachments and stuff. But generally, muzzle devices are not very expensive unless they are suppressor mounting systems. Well, suppressors are expensive. And besides being expensive, you have to pay a $200 tax stamp and wait for approval from the NFA, or from the ATF. They are a National Firearms Act item, but the ATF gives you approval before you could take it home. Now, right now, people are getting approvals faster than ever before in history. But not everybody is, unfortunately. I've been waiting on 2 suppressors now for one of them, the one that's going to go on these 5.56 guns with the ASR mount. I've been waiting 4 months. I'm also waiting on one for my 9mm here. I've been waiting 2 months already for that. So, not everyone is getting those quick approvals, but a lot of people are. That is apparently the new normal as far as the Form 4 approval system has changed. And generally, you're supposed to be able to get an approval within a week these days. Obviously, that didn't happen for me, but it is happening for a lot of people. And so suppressors are all of a sudden more accessible, I think, to more people than ever before. Yes, they still require a $200 tax stamp. They still require fingerprints and pictures and the entire, unconstitutional NFA process. But at least you might not have to wait a year before you get to bring it home, which is kind of a nice thing when you buy something expensive and pay an expensive tax on top of it. So what muzzle device do I recommend? Well, I recommend suppressors. But other than that, I recommend that you get what you think works best for you and what you do. If you're shooting competitions, you probably want a muzzle brake, something that's going to keep your rifle right on target, flat shooting, reduce as much recoil as possible. If you are, in the military and you're doing, nighttime clandestine operations or something, you probably want flash hiders. Well, you probably want suppressors. Generally, you always want suppressors. But my point is, though, that all of these muzzle devices do different things and can be used for different applications. So find what works best for you. And in fact, let me know in the comments what kind of muzzle devices that you prefer to run. Again, I prefer suppressors. If you enjoyed this video, please give me a like. Please share it with anybody that you know that should have a suppressor or just needs information on muzzle devices for their semi-automatic rifle. Anyway, make sure you subscribe, please, to Sawtooth Tactical. I appreciate each and every one of you guys. From Sawtooth Tactical, stay strapped or get clapped.